Ugh. Damn it. You know that feeling when you are so close to finishing a massive project, but the last tiny steps are somehow the most complicated, high-stakes bullshit imaginable? I'm living it right now with this PC build.
Oh man, the home stretch.
Mhm.
That point where your excitement about the new rig just collides violently with the reality of tiny components and infinite manuals. It's always something small, right?
Exactly. I finally bought the new power supply, so I'm feeling, much better about the whole thing now that the heavy lifting is done. Phew.
Nice.
Mhm.
That's a big hurdle cleared.
Yeah, but now I'm just waiting on that cursed 24 to 6 pin adapter to arrive because nothing is standard ever. And then I just have those microscopic, pesky front panel connectors.
Ugh, don't even talk about front panel connectors. The absolute worst.
You know the ones where if you plug the positive and negative LED connections backward, your whole damn $3,000 motherboard might just decide it wants to become a, I don't know, a pre-war toaster oven?
Huh, yeah, pretty much. The stakes feel ridiculously high for something the size of a grain of rice.
Yeah. It's astronomical for something the size of a Tic Tac. It's this complexity hidden just beneath the surface, We trust these small, almost invisible connections to handle massive amounts of power and data flawlessly.
Right. And the stress is all about that hidden potential for just complete catastrophic failure if you mess up one tiny little thing.
Exactly. That stress, that dread, that one wrong, almost invisible connection will fry the entire damn motherboard, costing you time, money, and your sanity. That is the perfect analogy for the moral landscape of Fallout 3.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. High stakes, hidden complexity, potential for everything to go horribly wrong based on small choices.
Precisely. We are diving into a stack of community sources today because for years there's been this persistent critique that Fallout 3 was, well, a moral shit show.
Yeah, you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Simplistic black and white choices, right? And that karma system.
Yeah, boy.
It was full of those easy choices and a karma system that basically reduced complex ethical decisions to an unnecessary blinking meter on your Pip-Boy. And that's our mission for this deep dive,
Right.
to really dig in and uncover if the game truly lacked moral depth, or if maybe the gray was simply hidden, much like those tiny front panel connectors tucked away in the irradiated details of the side quests.
Right. Because, many players glance at the karma counter ticking up or down, good karma, bad karma, and just assume the morality is that simple.
But the sources we've looked at strongly suggest that while, yeah, the main quest might be pretty linear and that morality meter is blunt, to say the least, the truly fucked up, impossible ethical dilemmas, they're actually pretty plentiful if you go looking for them, especially off the beaten path.
It's like the difference between looking at the big friendly Brotherhood of Steel logo on the Citadel wall and actually digging into, how they operate day to day, especially after the main quest.
Exactly. So we're going to dissect this supposed simplistic morality of Fallout 3 and see where the real utilitarian horror, the real messy stuff, lies. And I guess we have to start with the system that caused so much of the controversy in the first place.
The karma meter itself. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the central criticism, and you see this across so many Fallout community sources, it's crystal clear. The karma system in Fallout 3 is often just flagged as one of the worst design ideas in the whole series.
Yeah, it's pretty divisive, to put it mildly.
It doesn't just record your actions, it defines them instantly. It slaps a label, good, evil, neutral, on incredibly complex ethical situations and boils them down to this glowing binary meter.
And that right there, that immediately removes so much ambiguity, doesn't it? If you shoot a raider who is, actively trying to kill you, you get good karma. Simple.
Right. Or you steal a pencil from someone's desk when they're not looking as the backup. Bad karma. Zap.
It basically tells you exactly how to optimize your moral playthrough. Like, here's the good path, here's the evil path, pick one and stick to it. Which feels fundamentally counter to, dynamic role-playing, doesn't it?
Totally. It turns morality into this predictable min-max calculation. You're not really thinking through the implications. You're just looking at the meter and thinking, okay, how do I nudge this number up or down?
It externalizes the whole process. You're focusing on the meter, the score, rather than the actual consequences of your actions within the world and on the people around you.
And this design, as our sources point out, leads directly to this really cynical, but honestly pretty practical observation about playing the game. The evil option. It's very often the path of least resistance. Or just, frankly, the more lucrative choice.
Oh yeah, better rewards, faster progression. Sometimes it's just flat out easier than doing the quote-unquote good thing. Less running around, fewer skill checks needed sometimes.
Exactly. So If you're role-playing as, say, a pragmatic, maybe cynical, opportunistic wasteland survivor, which, let's be honest, is a perfectly valid and maybe even likely persona in that world.
Totally valid. Probably makes more sense than being Mother Teresa out there.
Right. The game mechanics strongly encourage you to be evil, purely because it pays better, it's faster, and it often requires less skill investment up front.
So you don't even need some deep, philosophical commitment to nihilism or whatever to choose the dark path. You just need, 1,000 caps instead of 100, and maybe a fancy apartment instead of a shack.
The incentive structure itself kind of pushes you toward being a horrible bastard just for the mechanical benefits, its efficiency over ethics.
And that really brings us to that bigger debate about what Fallout is fundamentally about, doesn't it? Is the series about personal morality, these individual choices? Or is it more about these larger clashing ideologies?
That's a really key point raised in the sources. You look back at the original creators, like Tim Kaine, who was involved in the first Fallout. He specifically said his vision was about exploring the ethics of a post-nuclear world. The focus was on the individual wrestling with difficult choices in this brutal new reality.
Okay, so the original intent was ethics-driven.
Right. The argument presented is that the original games really hammered home those personal ethical choices, whereas maybe later entries, and New Vegas gets cited a lot here,
Yeah, New Vegas definitely feels different in that regard.
it shifted the focus much more heavily toward faction ends. These big ideological, almost geopolitical conflicts between groups like the NCR, the Legion, House.
That distinction, morality versus ideology, feels really crucial here. Ideology is like the belief system you sign up for, right? Following the tenets of the Brotherhood of Steel or Caesar's Legion or whatever.
Exactly. Whereas morality is what you do in the moment, faced with an immediate choice, sometimes regardless of the flag you're flying. It's the action itself.
Okay, so let's take New Vegas again as that contrast. When you decide to join Caesar's Legion, that's a huge ideological commitment, right?
Yeah.
You're buying into their system of brutal expansionist stability.
Huge. And to make that choice, as the sources really emphasize, you have to actively, consciously ignore the immediate moral reality of what you've seen them do.
Like the massacre at Nipton.
It's exactly like Nipton. You roll into town and see people crucified, lottery winners killed, enslaved. Just pure brutality. And yet, you can still decide, yeah, this is the faction for me.
Which is a massive moral compromise or failure,
Yeah.
justified by this bigger perceived ideological goal of order, however twisted.
Precisely. It's an ideological choice with massive, unavoidable moral implications that the game lets you kind of compartmentalize.
So back to Fallout 3 then. If its karma meter is constantly pinging you bad karma gain, good karma gain for every little thing, doesn't that kind of prevent that kind of high-level ideological justification? Doesn't it constantly drag you back to the immediate morality?
It does, arguably. It reminds you instantly, hey, you just did something the game considers bad, which might make it harder to rationalize your actions as part of some grand, necessary scheme. You can't easily forget the individual acts. But the critique is that the meter itself is just too broad, too simplistic. It doesn't care why you did something. Did you steal that stim pack because you're a kleptomaniac asshole? Or because you desperately needed it to save someone's life and had no other option?
The meter just sees theft. Bad karma.
Exactly. It just tracks the net result, stripping away the context, the intent, the nuance. And this leads to that perception that the moral questions in Fallout 3 were maybe rooted at a simpler level. Individual acts, community problems, not these grand faction-based geopolitical struggles that maybe define New Vegas more.
And the tension then comes because the game's reward system often makes being consistently good feel like you're intentionally handicapping yourself, right? While being evil is just efficient. It pays better.
That's the core tension many players felt. The mechanics sometimes seemed at odds with fostering deep moral role-playing, pushing you towards convenience or profit, even when the story presented a choice.
Okay, so if we're going to talk simplistic choices, we absolutely have to talk about the atomic elephant in the room. Megaton. The quest power of the atom.
Yep. This is it. This is the iconic dilemma. Every single critic, fan, source material. Everyone points to this when they talk about Fallout 3's morality, or lack thereof, according to some.
And the motivation for the evil choice here. It just sets such a bizarre, almost darkly comedic tone for the whole thing, doesn't it?
It really does. You've got Mr. Burke, right, acting on behalf of the incredibly wealthy, holed up in his tower, Alistair Tenpenny, and they want you to detonate the live, undetonated nuclear bomb sitting right in the middle of this settlement.
A settlement built around the bomb, no less. And the reason? The entire justification for wiping this town and everyone in it off the map.
Because from Tenpenny's fancy penthouse suite, Megaton is an eyesore.
An eyesore, that's it. It's just aesthetically displeasing to this rich old dude.
It's staggering, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's evil motivated purely by aesthetic snobbery. A millionaire literally doesn't want to look at poor people living in scrap metal shacks, so he hires you to commit nuclear genocide.
It's genuinely sickening when you think about it, but it's also, I have to admit, it's one of the most brilliant pieces of dark comedy in the game. It perfectly captures this sense of absurd, trivial evil born from extreme wealth and detachment.
Evil rooted in pure, utter, trivial convenience and privilege. It's unforgettable.
So the basic choice, as presented right there on the surface, is you can defuse the bomb, you get good karma for that naturally. You get a pretty modest reward, what, 100 caps? Or maybe 500 if you pass a speech check with Sims?
Something like that. And you get a free house in Megaton, which is actually quite useful early on.
Right, or you can detonate it for Mr. Burke. You get evil karma, obviously, but you get a much bigger payout, 500 or even 1,000 caps. And you get that luxury suite up in Tenpenny Tower instead of the shack.
So on the face of it, it looks like a very clear transactional choice. Good gets you a little bit and a basic home. Evil pays way better and gets you fancy digs.
But this is exactly where the sources we looked at really push back hard against that simplistic critique. They argue that the consequences of this choice, they have massive, often hidden depth that a lot of players, especially maybe on a first playthrough, completely overlook or don't appreciate.
Yeah, blowing up Megaton is absolutely not inconsequential. Far from it. It fundamentally rips apart your early game economy, your access to resources, your quest lines, everything.
Okay, break that down. What exactly do you lose?
Well, first off, you instantly lose an astonishing amount of critical resources and services right there in one central hub. We're talking about the immediate permanent loss of multiple fixed merchants.
Like Moira Brown in Craterside Supply.
Moira actually survives the blast and becomes a ghoul, setting up shop in Underworld, so you don't technically lose her entirely, but you lose her convenient Megaton location and inventory early on. But more importantly, you lose the town doctor, Doc Church.
Ah, yeah. Losing the doctor that early, that's a massive operational blow, isn't it? Especially for a low-level wanderer just starting out. Suddenly healing is much harder.
Way harder. You're suddenly relying solely on finding or buying expensive stim packs, or finding the rare beds out in the wasteland that actually heal you. It adds significant difficulty and forces you to manage your inventory much more carefully. No more cheap loan repairs or rad removal.
And you mentioned other merchants.
Yeah, you lose Leo Stahl at the water processing plant. He's the only dedicated, reliable early game chem seller. So your access to things like Radaway, Radex, Mentats, that gets severely hampered.
Okay, so your medical and chemical support structure just evaporates. What else?
Companions. You lose access to the game's earliest available low karma companion, Jericho. If you haven't recruited him before the boom, he's just gone, vaporized.
Right, the grumpy old raider guy. So evil players lose their first potential evil buddy.
Exactly. And you also lose some crucial, really easy methods for gaining positive karma, ironically. Specifically, the ability to talk to Walter at the water processing plant to convert scrap metal into caps and good karma, or talking to the confessor in the Church of the Atom to donate caps for good karma. Those options vanish.
Huh. So blowing up the town actually makes it harder to be good later, in a way?
In terms of easily farming karma points, yeah. And mechanically, there are big losses too, especially if you're a player who hasn't invested heavily in lockpick skills right at the start.
Like what?
Two really crucial fixed items inside Sheriff Lucas Sims's house. The Strength Bobblehead, which gives a permanent +1 to Strength.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's huge.
And the entire town armory, which has a decent stash of early game weapons and ammo. Both are behind locked doors or containers. If you nuke the town before getting high enough lockpick to grab them, they're gone forever.
Man, that's a lot of utility just wiped out. Bobbleheads are permanent stat boosts.
It's a massive opportunity cost. And it doesn't stop there. The game world itself reacts with, like, visceral hatred towards you. You don't just get a slap on the wrist in a fancy apartment.
Well, that happens.
You immediately start getting hunted in random encounters by angry, well-armed Megaton refugees who, understandably, want your head.
Okay, so the wasteland gets more dangerous.
And if your karma drops low enough from the act itself or other deeds, the regulators, the good karma bounty hunters, will also start actively pursuing you across the map. They show up randomly to try and kill you, serving as this constant, annoying reminder of your bad deeds.
So the capital wasteland literally turns into a much more hostile environment because of this one choice.
Definitely. And perhaps most damaging, especially from a narrative and gameplay flow perspective, you permanently lock yourself out of several early side quests that originate in Megaton.
Like which ones?
The pipe-fixing mission for Walter, helping Leo Stahl with his drug habit for Doc Church, and Moriarty's initial side quest to collect debts, all gone. Poof.
Wow. So one source actually argued that they struggled to think of a single decision in the entire Fallout series that holds more tangible content, utility, and early game stability in the balance than the choice to nuke Megaton.
It's a strong claim, but when you list it all out, it's hard to argue against.
Yeah.
It only feels simple or inconsequential if you're maybe an experienced player who knows exactly how to strip mine the town for every single quest, cap, bobblehead, and piece of gear before you push the button.
Right. For a new player just following the quest prompts, it's potentially devastating to their playthrough without them even realizing what they've lost until much later, if ever.
Which makes the choice less about simple good versus evil morality, maybe more about sheer, almost economic recklessness versus prudence. You're trading immense utility and stability for a quick pile of caps in a nicer house.
But the utility loss is just staggering when you add it all up. Which, okay, this leads us nicely into that fan-suggested alternative we saw in the sources. How could Bethesda have made this a truly gray, agonizing choice, moving beyond Tenpenny's frankly ludicrous eyesore motivation?
Right, the community often brainstorms this. The most compelling scenario proposed is turning it into a genuine, gut-wrenching utilitarian trolley problem. What if Megaton wasn't just a struggling settlement, but had been overrun? Say, by a really powerful, organized faction of truly vicious raiders, think something like the Fiends or Jackals from New Vegas, or maybe even worse. Something akin to what happened at Nipton, but maybe the residents are still alive, trapped inside.
Okay, so the town is occupied by truly evil actors, and the civilians are hostages or worse. How does the bomb choice change then?
The dilemma shifts completely. Suddenly, Mr. Burke's offer isn't about aesthetics. Maybe it's presented as a brutal but necessary tactical option. Do you detonate the bomb, wiping out the entire city, killing all the innocent civilians trapped inside, along with the raiders purely to prevent those dangerous raiders from escaping, reorganizing, and potentially slaughtering hundreds, maybe thousands of innocent people across the entire capital wasteland?
Oh God, okay, yeah, that's horrific. That's the definition of utilitarian horror. You're sacrificing a known, contained number of innocent lives, the people of Megaton, for the uncertain but potentially massive future benefit of the greater population, preventing widespread chaos and suffering later by committing an atrocity now.
Exactly. It forces you to weigh innocent lives here against potentially more innocent lives everywhere else. There's no clean, good option anymore.
Or the alternative path. You try a rescue.
Right. You could attempt a risky, maybe even suicidal liberation effort. Try to sneak in, try to fight your way through, try to save the civilians, but you know that if you fail and the odds might be stacked against you, the raiders not only slaughter the people inside, but they also escape anyway and wreak havoc across the wasteland.
So the seemingly moral choice of attempting the rescue could actually lead to the worst possible outcome. Failure to save the immediate victims and unleashing the threat upon everyone else. Your attempt at heroism could cause even greater devastation.
Precisely. That's the kind of impossible choice that feels truly gray. And the variety of fan suggestions for handling that scenario, things like trying to sneakily free residents before triggering something, or maybe even just ignoring the whole situation until the raiders consolidate power, it just shows that the potential for true, painful moral ambiguity was always possible within Fallout 3's world and engine.
So the argument is, maybe the failure wasn't just the simplistic karma meter alone.
Right. It was also the simplicity of the motivation behind some of these core choices in the main quest, like Megaton's. It was too easily framed as just a cash incentive versus basic decency, rather than pitting two genuinely compelling but flawed philosophical or utilitarian arguments against each other.
Okay, so if Megaton is the big, iconic, maybe fundamentally flawed black and white dilemma, the sources we looked at almost universally point to the Tenpenny Tower quest involving the ghouls as maybe the best example of intentional moral subversion in the base game, like where the game actively trolls your attempts to be good.
Yeah, Tenpenny Tower is often cited as perhaps the only properly gray quest in the base game, but gray in a really cynical, almost nihilistic way. It presents a classic social conflict structure, right?
Yeah, it looks straightforward. You've got the wealthy, bigoted human residents living in their ivory tower, literally. And then you have this group of marginalized, feral-looking but sentient ghouls, led by Roy Phillips, who just want to move in and be accepted. Classic prejudice versus integration narrative.
And the game seems to give you clear paths. Path 1,
Yeah.
side with the prejudiced humans led by Tenpenny himself if he's still around, or Gustavo. Kill Roy Phillips and his ghoul buddies, get 500 caps for that. Quick, dirty appeals to the racist residents.
Path 2. Side with Roy Phillips. Help the ghouls get into the tower, usually by force, killing the resistant humans.
Right.
Your reward for this is the ghoul mask, which is actually super useful for navigating ghoul-infested areas. Plus, you get access to the tower now run by ghouls.
And then there's Path 3, the high road option, the peaceful resolution. This involves using a pretty high-speed skill check to convince Alistair Tenpenny, or Gustavo, and all the key prejudiced residents, specifically mentioning people like Dashwood, Lydia Montenegro, Anthony Lang, and Susan Lancaster by name, to actually accept the ghouls as neighbors. Let them move in peacefully.
Right, the diplomatic solution. The one that feels like the best outcome. You overcome prejudice, you achieve integration, everyone lives happily ever after, or so you think.
And if you succeed with the speech checks, the game rewards you like you've won. You get the caps from Tenpenny Gustavo for resolving the situation, and Roy Phillips gives you the ghoul mask as thanks for your help. You feel morally validated, you beat the system, you achieve peace.
But, oh god, the but. This is where it gets dark, isn't it?
This is the ultimate soul-crushing gut punch. Because, as countless players discovered, often by returning to Tenpenny Tower sometime later, Roy Phillips is not the peaceful integrationist he pretends to be when talking to you. Despite your diplomatic efforts, despite you successfully convincing everyone to live together, Roy Phillips and his ghouls inevitably, invariably, orchestrate the systematic murder of all the original human residents anyway.
Wait, all of them? Even the ones who agreed?
All of them. They take over the tower completely by slaughtering everyone you just convinced to give them a chance. Your successful peace initiative was just exploited by Roy as the perfect opportunity to get inside the gates and then carry out his vengeful massacre unopposed.
That is genuinely crushing. That's horrific. It means the player's best attempt at finding a moral, peaceful solution didn't just fail. Their intervention, their success at diplomacy, actively enabled a massacre.
Your effort to create peace was cynically exploited for genocide. The good path led directly to the worst possible outcome for the original residents.
And the implication is just grim. Sources mentioned players returning later, noticing all the humans were gone, asking the ghouls where they went.
And getting evasive answers. The dark conclusion players reached, as one source chillingly put it, was disappeared. Just check the basement. The implication is they didn't just move out, they were murdered. And their bodies were likely hidden or disposed of somewhere within the tower's depths.
Wow. So that completely invalidates your moral victory. It makes you seriously question whether you should have just taken the quick, clean, evil route from the start, just kill Roy Phillips for 500 caps. That would have actually prevented the bloodshed caused by your own misguided good effort.
Exactly. It's a brutal subversion. That degree of moral failure, where your best intentions lead directly to catastrophe, that's far grayer and more disturbing than a simple good karma equals good reward system. It suggests that sometimes, maybe trying to force peace in the wasteland is naive and dangerous.
That's a heavy one. Let's pivot now to another quest that delves into really complex themes. The Replicated Man over in Rivet City. This one gets into high-concept sci-fi territory, dealing with identity and what it means to be human.
Yeah, this is a really well-regarded quest for its narrative depth. It starts off feeling like a detective story. You're contacted by a scientist, Dr. Zimmer, who's hunting a runaway android, an Institute synth. He wants you to track it down.
So you expect a simple fetch quest, maybe hunt down some rogue machine?
Pretty much. But the big twist, the core of the quest's moral weight, is discovering that the runaway synth isn't some random robot. It's Harkness, the chief of security for Rivet City.
Whoa, okay, the guy in charge of keeping everyone safe.
Exactly. And he's one of the Institute's most advanced synthetic models, but he's had a memory wipe. He genuinely believes he is human. He's built a life, a reputation, a sense of duty and morality, all while being unaware of his artificial origins.
So the game suddenly throws these huge philosophical questions right in your lap. What defines humanity? Is it biology? Or is it consciousness, self-awareness, moral action? Does a synthetic life form deserve freedom and self-determination if it achieves sentience and believes itself to be human?
And the choice becomes excruciating. Do you help Harkness? You can help him keep his secret, maybe even get him new identification, help him escape Zimmer's pursuit forever. This path affirms the idea of synthetic freedom, protects a being who, for all intents and purposes, is living a moral, meaningful life.
Or the alternative.
Or you betray him. You turn him over to Dr. Zimmer and the Institute. This likely condemns Harkness to being deactivated, possibly dissected, studied for scientific advancement. You'd be prioritizing potential long-term technological benefit, maybe understanding synth technology better, over the life and freedom of this individual sentient being.
Man, and the weight of that choice lies entirely in empathy, doesn't it? And how you personally define personhood. It's got almost nothing to do with the karma meter's judgment of whether telling Zimmer is good or bad. It's about your own ethics.
Precisely. It's a purely philosophical and empathetic dilemma.
Okay, and then there's another quest that really subverts expectations. Blood Ties, the one involving the family up in Arafu. This one starts out feeling like a standard horror trope, right?
Totally. You arrive in Arafu, this tiny settlement, and they're terrified. They think they're being attacked by vampires. The residents have been murdered, drained of blood, and the young boy, Ian West, has gone missing. They send you to investigate the nearby metro tunnels where they think these vampires live. The expectation is clear. Go kill the monsters, rescue the kid. Standard hero stuff.
But the reality you find down there is way more complicated and disturbing.
Way more. You find the family, led by Vance. They do drink blood, but they claim they aren't mindless monsters. They present themselves as, well, as former cannibals who are trying to find a less harmful way to survive their urges. They've developed this code, this philosophy around only drinking blood, preferably willingly given, as a way to control their darker impulses.
Okay, so they're reformed cannibals trying to be ethical vampires. That's already weird.
It's super weird. And then comes the twist about the missing boy, Ian. He wasn't kidnapped. The family tells you, and evidence supports it, that Ian actually murdered his own parents in Erfu, drank their blood in some kind of psychotic break, and then fled. The family just found him wandering and took him in, trying to teach him their ways, maybe control his violence.
Oh my god, so the vampires aren't the villains, and the victim is actually a matricidal, patricidal budding something horrible.
Exactly. The dilemma completely flips. It's no longer about killing monsters, it's about what to do with Ian and how to handle the family. It becomes about redemption, community risk, and the nature of survival under these extreme mutated circumstances.
So what are your choices then?
You have to decide Ian's fate. Do you try to convince him to return to Arafu? This poses a huge potential risk of the community. Can he truly be reformed, or is he a ticking time bomb? Or do you leave him with the family? This means essentially exiling him from normal human society forever, condemning him to this strange, blood-drinking existence. But maybe it's the only place he can learn control or be safely contained.
And you also have to decide how to resolve the situation between Erfu and the family. Can you broker peace? Do you wipe out the family anyway?
Right. You can try to negotiate a deal where the family protects Arafu in exchange for blood donations, turning them into protectors instead of pariahs.
Yeah.
Or you could just decide they're too dangerous or too weird and kill them all, or just kill Ian. The morality is just stained with matricide, cannibalism, desperate attempts at reform. There is absolutely no clean, easy answer here.
Wow. That's definitely not black and white. Okay, one more big one from the base game that sources highlight for moral ambiguity. The absolute hellscape that is Tranquility Lane in Vault 112.
Tranquility Lane. This is pure, unadulterated psychological horror masquerading as a 50s suburban paradise. You go there looking for your father, James, only to find the vault dwellers aren't living. Their minds are trapped inside this virtual reality simulation.
Run by the Vault's overseer, Dr. Stanislaus Braun, who's basically playing God as this little girl avatar named Betty, and he's not well.
Not well is putting it mildly. He's a sadistic sociopath who's been tormenting the trapped minds of the vault dwellers for centuries, forcing them into loops of idyllic boredom, punctuated by his own twisted games. And to progress, to find your father and get out, you have to play along with Braun's madness.
Yeah, he forces you to become his little agent of chaos inside the simulation. You have to perform these truly disturbing antisocial tasks just for his amusement.
Things like making the little girl cry, breaking up a marriage, dressing up as a slasher villain, and killing residents. Just utterly degrading, cruel acts, all culminating in you potentially becoming the pint-sized slasher and triggering a town-wide massacre sequence. All just to satisfy Braun's twisted criteria for opening the exit back to the real vault.
And choosing this path, collaborating with Braun, means you leave him there to continue his eternal cycle of psychological torture on the remaining residents indefinitely, which feels like a massive moral atrocity in itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there is an alternative path, right? If you explore, resist Braun, maybe talk to old lady Dithers who seems to retain some awareness, you can discover a hidden terminal.
The abandoned house terminal, yeah. What does that do?
It allows you to activate a hidden failsafe program, the Chinese invasion simulation. Basically, it triggers a virtual apocalypse within Tranquility Lane. Virtual Chinese soldiers storm the simulation and kill pretty much everyone inside.
Okay, so it's a massacre either way. Play bronze game and kill everyone as the slasher, or trigger the failsafe and let the simulation kill everyone.
It seems like it at first, but the failsafe is even darker, because the vault dwellers are physically helpless, strapped into their simulation pods in the real world.
Yeah.
Activating the Chinese invasion doesn't just kill their virtual avatars, it triggers a lethal feedback that kills them in their chairs. Really kills them, both virtually and physically.
Jesus. So it's not just ending the simulation, it's euthanasia on a massive scale.
Exactly. But it does free the vault dwellers, permanently, from Dr. Braun's depraved eternal torment. It ends their suffering immediately and decisively, albeit through death.
So your choices are: become a pawn in a madman's eternal psychological torture chamber, condemning everyone else to suffer forever, or execute a mass, virtual, and real-world mercy killing to grant them release through annihilation.
It's a textbook moral no-win situation. There's no good outcome. You're forced to decide which form of horror is preferable: endless psychological torture or immediate violent death as a form of release. It forces the player to prioritize dignity and escape from suffering, even if the only way to grant it is through mass killing. It's truly deeply messed up. Okay, so moving beyond the base game. If Fallout 3 is often criticized for its moral simplicity, the first major DLC, The Pit, stands as maybe the single strongest counter-argument in the entire package. The sources consistently frame this as containing one of the most existentially difficult, purely utilitarian decisions in the whole Fallout series.
Yeah, the pit hits different. It's grim from the moment you arrive. This toxic, irradiated industrial hellscape, basically Pittsburgh after the bombs, run by a guy named Ishmael Asher, and it's built entirely on slave labor, processing steel.
The setup immediately throws you into this deep moral conflict. Asher, the leader of this slaver society, has made a monumental discovery. His infant daughter Marie seems to possess a natural immunity to the horrific mutation endemic to the pit, the troglodyte degeneration contagion, or TDC, which turns humans into these violent, devolved, toxic beasts called trogs.
And her blood might hold the key to a cure that could save not just the people of the pit, but potentially countless others across the wasteland facing mutations. The fate of the region, maybe more, potentially rests on this one baby.
Exactly. And the central conflict, the choice you're ultimately forced into, is framed between two deeply flawed leaders. Asher, the lord of the pit, the benevolent tyrant running the slave state.
And Werner, the escaped slave leading a rebellion. The freedom fighter. Sounds simple enough on the surface, right? Slave owner bad, freedom fighter good.
That's what it looks like initially. Werner finds you, tells you about the horrors of slavery under Asher, and tasks you with infiltrating the pit, finding the supposed cure, and using it to help him overthrow Asher and free the slaves. That's the immediate, morally satisfying choice. Liberate the oppressed.
But Werner isn't exactly a saint, is he?
Not even close. As you learn more, and as the sources describe him, Werner is revealed to be this incredibly spiteful, bitter, self-serving opportunist. Crucially, he used to be one of Asher's own raiders, a slaver himself before he had a falling out. His motives seem rooted more in personal revenge against Asher than in pure altruism for the slaves.
Okay, so the freedom fighter has a pretty checkered past and questionable motives. Does his plan hold up?
That's the other major problem. Werner's plan involves you kidnapping the baby Marie, but his rebel faction, they're disorganized, living in squalor, and critically, they lack the scientific knowledge, the resources, the stability required to actually research, develop, and distribute the cure safely for the baby's blood.
So if you give the baby to Werner,
the cure is almost certainly doomed. The baby becomes just a pawn, maybe a symbol, living in this chaotic, dirty, unprotected environment. The chance of developing a viable cure under Werner's leadership seems almost zero. His victory would likely mean freedom for the slaves, yes, but also the loss of the only hope for curing the Trog plague.
Wow. Okay, so the good guy's plan is morally satisfying in the short term, free slaves, but potentially catastrophic for everyone in the long term, no cure. What about Asher's side?
And then you meet Asher, and his regime is undeniably brutally evil in its methods. Open slavery, people work to death, a gladiatorial death pit arena called the Hole for entertainment and population control, deplorable living conditions for the slaves. It's horrific.
But there's always a but in these situations.
But Asher presents himself as a pragmatist, a visionary driven by a long-term goal. He argues that the slavery, the brutality, is a temporary necessary evil, It's the only way to maintain order, rebuild industry, and crucially, provide the stable, secure environment needed to research the cure.
And who's doing the research?
His wife, Sandra, who is a scientist, she is leading the research effort, using Marie's unique biology. Asher promises that once the pit is rebuilt, civilized, and the cure is fully developed and synthesized, slavery will end. He argues his brutal means are entirely justified by the noble end goal, saving everyone, including the slaves eventually, from the Trog threat that hangs over the entire region. He sees himself as shouldering a terrible burden for the greater good.
So he's offering progress, stability, a safe environment for the cure research, and this eventual promised hope for the entire population. But the price is ongoing systemic slavery right now.
Exactly. And the decision just hits you like a ton of bricks. It forces you into this impossible utilitarian calculation. Option A, steal the baby for Werner. You achieve immediate freedom for the slaves, which feels morally right. But you plunge the pit into chaos, almost certainly doom the cure, and condemn potentially the entire population, slaves included, to the eventual horror of the Trog mutation. Option B, leave the baby with Asher and his scientist wife. Side with the slaver regime. Slavery continues. Indefinitely, maybe, people suffer and die under brutal conditions right now. But you secure the high certainty of a cure being developed, a cure that could eventually save countless lives across the wasteland, potentially ending the Trog threat forever and leading to Asher's promised golden age for the pit.
God, that's rough. It's the ultimate utilitarian horror show. Do you support an undeniable present moral evil slavery for the sake of a potential massive future greater good for the species? Or do you choose immediate moral purity freedom now at the likely cost of catastrophic widespread suffering and mutation later?
You feel like a failure, like you've made a terrible choice, regardless what you pick. Saving the slaves likely means dooming the cure and condemning everyone else. Supporting the regime means enabling horror now for a potential future salvation. There's no outcome where you feel good about what you've done. It's arguably the peak of Fallout 3's moral ambiguity.
Absolutely brutal. And this theme of difficult choices, pitting mercy or immediate good against some form of utility or long-term consequence, it continues with another really memorable quest, especially for longtime fans. The situation with Harold and Oasis.
Harold. Yeah, this one hits hard, especially if you know his history. Harold is this recurring character, a unique mutant who's been around since the original Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. He's famous for having a tree bob growing out of his head.
Right, he was always this quirky, tragicomic figure. But by Fallout 3, his situation is much worse.
Much worse. Decades later, the mutation has progressed. Harold is now fully rooted into the earth in this hidden location called Oasis. He's the tree now, basically. A massive, sentient talking tree known as Harold and Bob, or just the talking tree. And his presence has miraculously terraformed the surrounding barren wasteland into a lush, green paradise.
Sounds kind of nice, being a life-giving tree god.
Except Harold is in agony. He describes his existence as constant, unending torment. He feels everything, the roots spreading, the insects, the immobility. He is suffering profoundly. And when the Lone Wanderer finds him, he explicitly, desperately pleads with you for a mercy killing. He wants it to end.
Okay, so the being himself wants to die. Seems straightforward. Grant his wish.
But the moral dilemma gets complicated, as always, by the external factors. The people living in Oasis, the tree minders, they worship Harold. They see him as a literal life-giving god. Their entire community, their survival, the very existence of this green paradise in the middle of the toxic wasteland, depends entirely on Harold continuing to live and grow.
So killing him would end his suffering, but it would also potentially destroy this unique sanctuary and the lives of the people who depend on it.
Exactly. And even among the tree minders, there's disagreement. Some, like Tree Father Birch, want to foster Harold's growth, make him spread his gift further across the wasteland, fulfilling their cult's purpose. Others, like Leaf Mother Laurel, fear his uncontrolled growth and want to find a way to stunt it, essentially keeping him alive, but contained, maybe out of a mix of reverence and fear.
So the options presented to you, the player, are all morally complex and loaded.
Deeply loaded. Option 1, compassion. You grant Harold the mercy killing he begs for. Use liniment or just destroy his heart. You end his profound chronic pain, fulfilling his final wish. But you betray the tree minders and possibly doom Oasis.
Option 2.
In utilitarian growth, you side with Birch. Apply a special salve that accelerates Harold's growth, potentially spreading life further into the wasteland. This fulfills the cult's purpose, achieves a greater ecological good, maybe?
Yeah.
But it condemns Harold to even more agonizing, unending suffering directly against his will.
And the third option.
Cruel stasis. You side with Laurel. Apply a different substance that stunts Harold's growth, halting his expansion. This appeases the fearful faction of the cult, maybe preserves Oasis in his current state. But it betrays Harold's desire for death and Birch's desire for growth, condemning Harold to live on in his painful, immobile state indefinitely. They feel like the most cowardly, compromised choice.
Man. So you're weighing the individual's right to escape suffering against the needs or beliefs of the many, and the potential ecological benefit, compassion versus utility versus fearful conservatism.
And for veteran players who remember Harold from the earlier games, seeing this beloved, quirky character reduced to this state, a sentient tree pleading for death, it adds this immense emotional weight. It's arguably the single heaviest personal moral decision in the entire game because you have this history with him. It's not just some random NPC, it's Harold.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time highlighting these really complex, morally gray side quests and DLCs. The Pit, Tenpenny Tower, Herald.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of depth there if you look for it.
But now we kind of have to circle back and acknowledge the validity of some of those initial criticisms, especially regarding the main quest line itself. Because despite the richness we just talked about, the sources are pretty consistent in pointing out that the actual main story, the hunt for your father, and Project Purity, it is highly linear.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. The path from Vault 101 to the Jefferson Memorial, finding James, dealing with the Enclave, it follows a pretty set sequence of events.
And outside of that very final decision at the Purifier, activating it yourself, sending Lions, or maybe sending Fox if you have him, there are surprisingly few points where your choices dramatically alter the main narrative's trajectory or outcome.
Right. Like, even if you commit the massive atrocity of nuking Megaton early on, does it really change the core quest of finding your father or the ultimate confrontation with the Enclave over the Purifier? Not really.
Your dad might be disappointed in you, as one source kind of dryly noted, maybe chews you out a bit.
Yeah, you get a stern talking to. But the major plot beats still happen largely the same way. The Enclave still shows up, Colonel Autumn still does his thing, the Citadel still needs saving. Your big moral choices often feel disconnected from the main plot's momentum.
And a really significant design flaw, according to many players and sources, was the lack of a true, meaningful option to actually side with the Enclave in the main story.
Oh yeah, that's a huge one. You can kind of pretend to cooperate with Colonel Autumn or President Eden for brief periods, usually under duress or deception.
Right, like when you're captured and taken to Raven Rock.
Exactly. But there's no point where you can just say, you know what, I believe in the Enclave's vision, sign me up. You can't formally join them, align your goals with theirs, and complete the game working for them, trying to achieve their objectives.
And that lack of an Enclave path felt like a massive missed opportunity, didn't it? Especially considering their prominence as the main antagonists.
Huge missed opportunity for role-playing. The community actively suggested things like, give us the option, maybe when you wake up in Raven Rock after being captured, to genuinely defect and side with President Eden and the Enclave outright. Let the player fully commit to their ideology.
Or even, some suggested, let the player reject both the Enclave and the Brotherhood of Steel. Let us declare open hostility to everyone and try to forge our own path, maybe take the Purifier for ourselves or for some other faction entirely.
A genuine third, maybe chaotic or independent path, was something a lot of players felt was desperately needed to inject more consequence and replayability into the main plot's finale.
Instead, we're largely funneled towards that final choice at the Purifier, which primarily revolves around the Brotherhood's plan versus the Enclave's plan, specifically involving the modified FEV.
Right, the forced evolutionary virus. This decision really embodies the Enclave's whole disturbing approach to fixing the wasteland. Their goal, as presented by President Eden, is essentially utilitarian purification taken to an extreme.
What's the plan exactly?
Introduce a modified strain of the FEV into the purified water distributed by Project Purity. This virus is designed to target and kill creatures with significant mutations. Super mutants, death claws, Marilurks, maybe even ghouls and heavily irradiated wastelanders. The goal is to cleanse the capital wasteland of mutation, making it safer for what the Enclave considers pure humanity.
But the cost? The cost is the defining moral horror of the Enclave, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because the wasteland environment is so pervasively irradiated and so many inhabitants have adapted or mutated to survive in it, this SEV strain is incredibly dangerous. It's theorized, or maybe intended, to kill nearly every living thing not born and raised in the controlled environment of a vault.
So basically all the surface-dwelling wastelanders, ghouls, friendly mutants like Fox, Potentially everyone who isn't pure human stock by the Enclave's xenophobic standards. It's essentially genocide disguised as purification.
It's biological warfare on a massive scale, framed as a necessary step for progress and security. It forces the player into this terrible moment of ideological commitment. Are you willing to accept mass death today, killing potentially millions of innocent, albeit mutated wastelanders and ghouls to eliminate what the Enclave perceives as the long-term threat of mutation and contamination? To create this hypothetically pristine, secure future exclusively for true humans.
It's a moment of absolutely chilling moral calculation, far more insidious and globally consequential, arguably, than the simple cash versus conscious choice of blowing up Megaton. This is about defining who deserves to live in the future wasteland.
And even if you reject the Enclave's plan, even if you side with the Brotherhood of Steel and activate the Purifier cleanly, we can't overlook that instant moral compromise that happened almost immediately afterwards with the supposed good guys.
Yeah, the Brotherhood, they risk everything: lives, technology, their war with the Enclave to secure Project Purity and bring clean water to the capital wasteland. It's presented as this heroic, altruistic endeavor.
For sure, Elder Lion's Brotherhood seems genuinely committed to helping the people. A big shift from the traditional Brotherhood isolationism. They fight, they bleed, they sacrifice to get that water flowing.
The moment the purified water is flowing, thanks to the Broken Steel DLC continuing the story, what does the Brotherhood immediately start doing?
They immediately start selling the clean water through their water caravans, rather than distributing it freely to everyone who needs it.
Right. They turn this vital existential resource, the very thing they supposedly fought and sacrificed everything for, into a commodity. They set up shop and start charging caps for life-saving water.
And that action, happening right after their heroic intervention, it instantly compromises their good guy image, doesn't it? It shows that even the supposed saviors of the capital wasteland are ultimately driven by self-interest, logistics, economics. Whatever the justification, it's not pure altruism anymore.
It's this rapid shift from selfless savior to pragmatic, maybe even exploitative profiteer that subtly but really effectively paints even the good guys in this highly ambiguous, kind of disappointing light. It muddies the moral waters considerably, even on the good path. Okay, so pulling this all together, if these side quests and DLCs and even some aspects of the main quest's Fallout are filled with these profound gray areas and difficult choices, why did that initial critique that Fallout 3 was morally simplistic and black and white stick so hard for so long?
That's a great question, and the sources suggest it often comes down to a simple but crucial factor: visibility. The game just doesn't always hold your hand and point out the moral complexity or the alternative solutions. They're often obscured, hidden behind exploration or skill checks.
So the depth is there, but you have to actively dig for it. It's not always presented up front in the dialogue options.
Exactly. And this is where we see a key methodological contrast often drawn between Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. In New Vegas, if there's a non-violent, diplomatic, or skill-based alternative solution to a quest,
You often get a quest marker for it, right? Or a very clear dialogue option like, Speech 75, convince him to stand down.
precisely. The game often explicitly signals those alternative paths, whereas in Fallout 3, those options are frequently there, but you have to discover them more organically. You have to actively work for them, maybe by exploring thoroughly, reading terminals, talking to seemingly minor NPCs, or just trying to use your skills on objects or people without an explicit prompt.
It's more a game of exploration then, not just exploring the world map, but exploring the possibilities of your character skills and your own curiosity.
That's how one source put it, yeah. It requires the player to be more observant, more curious, more willing to interact with the world beyond just following the quest compass and clicking dialogue options. In that sense, it arguably aligns Fallout 3 a bit more closely with the mechanics and player agency expectations of the classic Fallout 1 and 2.
Okay, can we use an example to illustrate that?
Sure, let's go back to the very beginning, that early quest to find out where your father, James, went from Megaton. You need to get information from Colin Moriarty, the saloon owner.
Right, and the obvious path is talking to him. He wants you to do a job for him first, collect a debt from Silver down in Springfield. Or maybe you can pass a speech check to convince him to tell you.
Those are the obvious dialogue paths, yes. But the sources point out there are actually multiple other ways to get that crucial information, showcasing this hidden variety. How many ways can you think of?
Okay. Obvious dialogue. Maybe. Can you pickpocket him?
Yeah, you can use your sneak and pickpocket skills to lift the password or key for his terminal right off him. Stealth solution.
Okay. What about hacking? Does he have a computer?
He does. You can bypass talking to him altogether if your science skill is high enough. Just hack into his terminal in the back room and read his private logs about James. Hacking solution.
Huh. Okay, so talk, persuade, do quest, pickpocket, hack. What else? Is there a violent option?
Of course. This is Fallout. You can always just kill Moriarty, loot the password from his corpse, and read the terminal that way. Violent solution.
So that's at least 5 distinct paths right there at the start of the game to achieve one simple objective. Persuade, complete his quest, pickpocket, hack, or kill.
Exactly. And that demonstrates true path variety, true player agency. But notice only 1 or 2 of those paths, talking quest, are explicitly signposted by quest markers or obvious dialogue prompts. The others require player initiative, skill investment, and exploring the game's mechanics outside of just linear conversation.
So the depth, the choice was often there. It just wasn't always shouting at you with a big flashing sign saying, alternative solution here.
Precisely. It wasn't always spoon-fed,
Yeah.
which some players appreciate. It rewards cleverness and exploration, while others might just miss it entirely and feel railroaded by the obvious path.
However, this does bring us back to that lingering criticism about the nature of the skill checks themselves when they are visible in dialogue, that whole insta-win button problem.
Right. The critique being that the moment you see that bracketed skill check in a dialogue option like Speech 75 or Science 50, especially if the percentage chance of success is displayed.
It kind of breaks the immersion, doesn't it? You stop thinking about what your character would actually say or do, and you just click the option with the highest number or the skill tag you've invested in.
That's the argument. It turns dialogue into a mechanical calculation rather than a role-playing performance. You're not role-playing being persuasive. You're just pressing the persuade button because the game told you you could.
And this is contrasted with how skill checks worked in the older Fallouts, right? Where they were often invisible.
Yeah, in the classics, you often wouldn't know if a particular dialogue choice required a skill check or what your odds were. You had to actively role-play your character's intelligence, charisma, or knowledge. By choosing the dialogue line you felt best matched their abilities and personality. The success or failure felt more organic, less like gaming a system.
So, when Fallout 3 externalizes these moral or mechanical decisions, whether it's through the karma meter constantly judging you, or the bracketed skill checks telling you the optimal path, it can instantly make the whole experience feel less nuanced, less gray.
Even if the underlying consequences of the choice, like we saw with Tenpenny Tower or the Pit, are actually profoundly deep and morally complex. This is a weird visibility paradox. Sometimes, by making the systems too transparent, you inadvertently flatten the player's perception of the depth that's actually there.
Yeah.
Hashtag outro.
Okay, so after digging through this pretty substantial stack of source material and community discussion, that initial common argument that Fallout 3 was just a simplistic black and white moral playground, it feels, well, incomplete, maybe even kind of shallow, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Well, you know, the karma meter was undeniably rudimentary, maybe even clumsy. And yeah, the main plot often railroaded you down a pretty linear path. The game's true moral complexity, its real shades of gray, often lay hidden, tucked away within its dense web of side quests, its morally ambiguous characters, and especially in those challenging DLCs like The Pit.
We found choices that were just brutal exercises in pure utilitarianism, like that ruthless calculus you face with Asher versus Werner in The Pit.
Yeah.
And then these profoundly challenging dilemmas of mercy versus suffering, or identity versus programming, like the heartbreaking decision over Harold, or trying to figure out what to do about Harkness, the synth who thought he was human.
The true gray, the real moral struggle, it was definitely there. But it often required you, the player, to look past those immediate good karma or evil karma signposts. You had to engage with the darkness, the ambiguity simmering just beneath the surface to really find it and grapple with it.
So I guess the key takeaway here, the thing that really emerges from all this, is that the most difficult, the most memorable decisions in Fallout, maybe especially in Fallout 3, are those ones where your intent, right, your own moral compass, what you want to achieve, is constantly pitted against the actual consequence, the outcome in that harsh, irradiated world. And man, frequently the best intended outcomes in Fallout 3 just end up sucking. They lead to these unintended, often catastrophic moral failures.
Absolutely. Like we saw so clearly with that attempt to make peace in Tenpenny Tower. You try to do the right thing, the diplomatic thing, and you end up enabling a goddamn massacre in the basement. It's brutal.
Which kind of leaves us, and you listening, with this final, maybe provocative thought to chew on next time you're wandering the capital wasteland.
If pursuing a clearly defined good outcome, trying to be the hero, broker piece, Grant freedom so often results in catastrophic moral failure in this world. If it enables massacres, like at Tenpenny, or potentially dooms a species-saving cure, like siding with Warner might have.
Does that mean the only truly ethical decision in the post-apocalypse is actually the one that prioritizes stability? Security, long-term survival for the species, or at least the community, regardless of the immediate, often brutal moral cost.
Is a stable world even one built on the undeniably horrific foundation of Asher's slavery in the pit? Or maybe even the Enclave's twisted vision of purity, ultimately more moral in the long run than the fleeting individual satisfaction of choosing a path that feels good now but might lead to chaos, suffering, and ruin later?
Does the utilitarian calculus, however grim, eventually outweigh personal conscience in a world that's barely holding on? Something to think about. It's a question that just keeps the wasteland spinning, doesn't it?